Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write a review. Also, you can watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Joining me today to talk about Singapore Grand Prix, it's Jesse Blake. Jesse, what's happening, man? How are you?
The best race of the year. Yeah, straight off the top, let's get into a best race of the year.
100%, man. And how about Carlos Sainz, Ferrari, baby? Yes.
Yeah.
They're back for a weekend.
Yeah. No, the dude's a genius. Like, the dude is tell me how far 100%. Lando is behind, because I need to be in that DRS zone so he can defend for me. Sainz is a genius. What a win.
100%. Totally agree with you. I thought it was great, Jesse. We have 4 drivers at the end of this thing battling for the win until, obviously George went off and crashed, but outside of that, before we jump into talking about Ferrari and Carlos, if you look at social media reaction, the number of people that were actually watching this race, and then on the flip side of that, not having Red Bull dominate and win, you have to wonder if Liberty Media is having a look at this thing, because there's been a lot of conversation lately about balance of performance. It's something we've talked about on this podcast before. And trying to find ways of reining in dominant teams. Mm-hmm. And you have to wonder, when Liberty Media looks at, last season was really good. Season before that was really good as well. This season hasn't been the greatest. It's been great to see what Max has been doing, but there hasn't been a ton of competition. This weekend, we've got a lot of competition, man. Like, a lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think Liberty Media is thinking?
I think they look at the 2021 season where things kind of seem to peak with F1, and it's a large part because of the Max and Lewis battle. It came down to literally the final lap on the final race. Like, you can't ask for better drama than that. And as the governing body of the sport, as the people in charge of making this thing entertaining, I think they look at this and they say, we need to generate that as much as possible. It's why leagues try and manufacture parity through things like restricted free agency and salary caps and keeping guys in markets. So players got to stick around places. You can't build super teams, because dominance, even though it's great for history and we remember those teams the most, you still want challengers to the great teams, So I think they see a weekend like this and they see how varied the results behind Red Bull have been all season. They say, hey, if that was the entire season, all of those second place results, this could have been something extra in terms of the entertainment factor, even though what Max is doing is extremely entertaining on the grand history scale of it. But I think Liberty kind of sides with this kind of entertainment where at any moment, anybody can win, and it's always exciting for every lap of the race.
Yeah, that's what these regulation was designed to do, right? Is designed to have it that we see races like this where at some points within the season, you could see 8 drivers at any given time, fighting for victory. And again, like you and I have actually spoken about on the podcast before, is if, you remove Red Bull, that's essentially what you have for this season. It's just that Red Bull's done such a tremendous job of nailing the regulation, finding extra performance, exploiting that. And now you've got all of these teams that are trying to really claw back all of that performance. And I think at this time, you look at it, Red Bull's essentially, they've shut down their basically upgrading this car for the rest of the season. Kind of shut that down. That's done with now. They've moved on to the 2024 car. They've taken a lot of the wind tunnel time that they've got for this season. They've dumped that into the 2024 car, which is a smart move by them, because they only have 60% wind tunnel time up until October, and then that gets cranked up to 70%. And so for Red Bull, it's let's try and get this thing a little bit faster so we can get another head start in 2024. And I think if you're Liberty Media, you got to be a little worried about that. I think that's something you got to be worried. Obviously you can't go and change the rule. You can't go and change the regulation. It's all in the Concord Agreement. Everybody's agreed upon it, but they have to hope that the other 3 teams that are in this battle can claw back enough of the performance that by the time we get to like race 5 or 6 in 2024, we're going to have at least 2 teams fighting for the lead here. But a lot of people behind the scenes they seem to think that it's not going to happen. So I'm really interested to see how all this goes down, because if they can get what we saw today next season, I mean, look out. It would be extremely entertaining, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and when you go back to a track like Monza and you see how fast the Red Bull is in any situation where they can just go all out for a long time and just gain that advantage, it's not like all of a sudden that's gone because of this race at Singapore. They still have that in the car at other tracks, and I don't think it's going to be easy for any team to gain those seconds back. But you've talked about this before, and I think it's important for them to keep the regulations the same for as long as they can. If you keep it on the even playing field, there's only so much you can upgrade. And eventually, if everything's kind of stagnant, teams can catch up. And so I don't know how you can manufacture into these couple windows we have left on these regulations. But the more they can limit the changing of the car, I think it'll be better for the overall sport.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely agree with you, because if you're allowing another regulation change to come in, which is supposed to hit in 2026, you're just going to have another scenario where there's going to be a team that's going to hit on something, and then you're going to get another round of dominance, and then you're going to lose a lot of this avid fan base and that you've built up. And it's like you've hit a home run here. Like, you need to hold on to these fans. And so the race that we saw today, I could notice just on my social media, compared to a race that's really wild compared to something that's a little more sedate. I even noticed it just through there. So I can only imagine what it's like everywhere else.
Yeah. And a part of all of that was also Max starting behind and people tuning in just to see if he could do it.
Good point.
All of the dominance, it was a perfect storm, because you have Max in the back, and some people are like, he's 11th. Like, can he win this one too? Like, can he do the impossible? So, and then he didn't end up doing it, and then we get all the four at the top racing. So it was just fantastic in every way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Carlos Sainz grabs his second win for Ferrari, first of the season. He is the driver that broke Max Verstappen's winning streak. He is also the driver that broke Red Bull Racing's winning streak. I believe they were on a roll of 15 consecutive race wins, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's
unbelievable.
What the stat was. Pretty crazy. Yeah, you're right, Jesse. It's unbelievable, man. So let's get into his race a little bit, because, he had some interesting tactics, and he deployed them early in the race, where essentially he was backing everybody up into each other. So for those of you who were watching the race, and you didn't really quite know what was going on, so the DRS effect at Singapore, it wasn't that strong. It's not like the normal attack that most teams can get with the DRS at other tracks. In Singapore, it was a lot less. And so essentially what Sainz is doing is he's trying to keep buffers in between himself, but he's also, at the beginning of the opening stint, is he's trying to see who's going to pit first, because since everyone is stacked together, it's essentially a DRS train, and it's kind of like, okay, well, who's going to blink first and go into the pits? And so for Carlos, I mean, bit of a risky strategy, Jesse, because if he makes a mistake, man, it's over.
Oh, yeah, but it was so impressive, and I wonder how much of this was him doing it himself, because that's what it felt like. It felt like
100%.
A genius race car driver thinking about the entire field on his own. It didn't seem like much of the directive came from the Ferrari pit wall. And I don't think we give Carlos Sainz enough credit for what an incredible drive this was, because the flat out pace that you can pull off on this track is obviously tenfold to what he's racing during the race. Mm-hmm. And to go that slowly is what he's doing for the entirety of the race, just to fulfill this strategy where everybody's backed up and you can gain your pit advantage. And when you need to go out, you can speed up and get away from it. It's such an incredible thing to do. And I don't even know if there's enough credit being given to Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think if we go all the way back to like Monza, and he had to deal with, holding off the Red Bulls for as long as he could. And then he also had to deal with his teammate, who he was trying to hold off as well on really old tires. And so he's been incredible since the summer break. And something I want to get into in just a bit. But first, I want to talk about that tire management there, because, he went on to that hard tire compound really early, around lap 20, I believe it was. And he was nervous about that because he knew that tire was not going to last very long. And so he noticed that, once he started pushing on that hard tire compound, it really started to deg quite quickly. So it started to erode quite quickly. And that's when we get into this situation with that virtual safety car. As soon as that's deployed, he's got to think Mercedes are pitting. They're throwing on those new mediums. Ferrari didn't have any tires left for him. So what Carlos started on was he started on a fresh new medium, and all he had at his disposal was one new hard compound tire and then 4 used soft tires, which were junk because they were saying if he had gone in and jumped onto the soft tire, it was only going to last for a few laps anyways, and the Mercedes were still going to catch him. And so for Carlos, he had to do the old DRS, back Lando Norris up into the 2 Mercedes who were chomping at the bit, man. They were coming to get him. And so I think for Carlos, that was brilliant, Jesse. Like really brilliant stuff from him.
I think it was Crofty who mentioned it on the broadcast, but when you get to that point of the race and you look at like the tire discrepancy versus the drivers, and it's usually like five laps on the medium or 10 laps on the medium. But at the end here, it was like 30 laps of difference in a completely different compound. And the way he's able to manage that and also think of the strategy in real time, like I mentioned off the top, when he's telling the race engineer, like, give me the time so I can back him up into the DRS zone so I can defend properly. Like, that's genius driving. And I feel like a driver who's not as smart, who's not as experienced, doesn't win this race the way that Carlos Sainz does.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you go back and you rewatch this race, it's around lap 59. So Carlos was allowing Lando to get within his DRS. And essentially, for those listening and watching, what that does is, since the DRS is not that powerful at Singapore, it still offers a bit of an advantage. So essentially, you get this DRS train where nobody can pass anybody because the performance is pretty close to equal when it comes to the straightaways. They have to hope that the driver in front of you makes a mistake and really capitalize on him that way. Once we get to lap 59, and you've got the 2 Mercedes drivers bearing down on both Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. Carlos knows that, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are coming for the win, and they're probably going to get it. And so if he backs up Lando enough, allows him to get that DRS, that's going to keep those 2 drivers at bay. But the issue happens on 59 where Norris's tires just degrade. They're gone. They're toast. And so he's under attack from George Russell from turns 14 all the way through to 17. And on lap 60, so Carlos is passing the start-finish line. He's looking in his mirrors. There's no Lando. Lando's not around anymore. So he's like, oh, crap. As soon as he heads into turn 1, 2, and 3, he slows right down. So he slows the car down, and that allows Lando to catch back up so he can get back into the DRS train. And once they come out of turn 3, they're back onto another straightaway, and Lando's got that DRS, and George Russell actually makes a bit of a mistake coming out of turn 3. That allows Lando to close that gap to Carlos. That allows a little bit more of a buffer, and then we get George hitting the wall a few laps later. And so all of that had to go perfectly for Carlos Sainz, because, Jesse, if he screws up, like in corners 1, 2, or 3, like just slowing up just a little bit, it's over, man. We're talking about a different winner at this point.
Yeah, because like your instinct as a race car driver is to race, just go. We got 4 laps left. I got to race as fast as possible to kind of end this thing. But he's like, no, there's a strategy here, and I got to defend the guys behind Norris, because that's who I need to be defending, because Russell and Hamilton are on these new fresh tires, and it's just such a smart decision there. And I think it was about 13 kilometers per hour that you're getting on the DRS, and you needed about 2 seconds per lap to pass somebody on the track. And all of these things come into play here. It's like, I can't allow Lando to get that faster lap time to me to give him an advantage to pass me, but I also need to keep him in that 1 second window. So he's like, if I keep him at that 0.8, like, I'm just going to be able to manage this for 3 more laps and get to the finish. And he was magically able to do it. Very impressive stuff.
It was interesting about the DRS. Lewis actually made mention of this in the post-race press conference. He said, like, the delta was around, you would need about 1.5 seconds worth of extra performance to pull off a good pass at Singapore. He said because the DRS, like you would say, just wasn't powerful enough, and that's the advantage that your car would need to have if you really wanted to pull off a pass that was quite straightforward. We had mentioned earlier, just how great Carlos Sainz has been, especially since the summer break. So during that summer break, heading in, Jesse, to the summer break, I would say, and you and I did talk about this before, where it was, Carlos had a really strong start to the season. And he had outscored Charles Leclerc, I think, up until Canadian Grand Prix. I think he was ahead of Leclerc in the driver's standings up until then. And then Leclerc beat him in Canada. And now they've been kind of going back and forth ever since. But Carlos sort of had this dip in performance. And he was really, really struggling. And in the summer break, he and his engineer sat down and they started to chat about what he can do to make sure that he's consistent throughout the weekend, because he hasn't been consistent throughout a race weekend. They said to him that the pace has been there for him, but he hasn't been able to put it all together. He hasn't put together a full weekend. He put together a full weekend in the Dutch Grand Prix. He did it again in Monza, and he did it again this weekend. It's really difficult to string together a perfect weekend. That's where you see the champions separate themselves from everyone else, because of the amount of mental capacity it takes to forge your way forward to make sure that every single session you're not screwing up and you're maintaining perfect consistency throughout each session. You're not screwing the tires. You're not locking anything up. You're not hitting the wall. You're not spinning off the track. And you're making sure that your feedback is solid. So for me and Carlos Sainz, and I have people text me this, that they're starting to get off the Charles Leclerc, train here. And they're coming over to the Carlos Sainz train, like I had said earlier in the season, eh?
Yeah, it's like, is the younger driver, like, does he have a brighter future ahead of him? Like, you look at Sainz and Leclerc, and everybody kind of defaulted to, is Leclerc's the number one and Sainz is going to be number two come the future, and how it's going to go. And I was just looking at the driver standing just to check, and Sainz is ahead of Leclerc right now. Like he's had a better season so far. And there was that lull in the middle where he was finishing. He had that 11th place finish and like 10th place, and he was struggling a little. But now he's back to form, and when they're both at their best, it's hard to distinguish who's the number one driver here. And I think we got to start looking at Ferrari as having two number ones, and maybe if Sainz is doing this, like now currently in his career, maybe the future is brighter for Sainz, and they should be looking towards building this team around him.
Well, I mean, what if you're Frederick Vasseur? What do you do? Like that's my question. Like if you're Frederick Vasseur, Jesse, like, I mean, you have two. Well, now, I mean, like you had said, and I agree, Carlos Sainz has definitely planted that flag in the ground saying that he's a number one driver too. What do you do? That's because Vasseur has been public about wanting to try and build a team around Charles Leclerc.
Yeah. But it's a good problem to have, I guess. Like you'd rather have this than somebody who's struggling in the second position. And I don't know if you make a switch and you say like Sainz is number one or anything like that, but I don't think you can go the course that you were going anymore for Ferrari. I don't think it's Leclerc's our number one and that's it, and this is how we're building the team. I think that's out the window because Sainz, he's too impressive as a driver. All of the talent is there, and if he gets the car and he gets a perfect conditions where the race has strategy is going well, and there are no pit screw ups by Ferrari, like he's in contention to win when Max isn't running away with it. And for now, I think Ferrari needs to look at it as, hey, we got a 1A and a 1B, and it's not 1 and 2 anymore.
Charles Leclerc's race, he came home fourth, kind of dropped off the map there with about 18, 20 laps to go in this one. I think for Leclerc, he was on the same sort of tire strategy that Sainz was, and his job actually wasn't to protect Carlos Sainz. That wasn't the team order. Carlos had mentioned that the team wasn't betting on him to really win. He said the two of them were just trying to do whatever they could do to pull out a win. And Ferrari was trying to give both of them the best races that they possibly could. For Leclerc, it just kind of came down to that way, sort of screwed the tire, and that was it. It took too much life out of it too early, and it was over for him. So another tough race for Charles Leclerc. That's 3 in a row, I would say. I mean, was Monza tough? I mean, I guess not. I mean, he did finish P4, but at the same time, he did get outperformed by Sainz again. Constructors Championship, Ferrari moves now up into 3rd. I didn't see that coming at the beginning of the season, and just how bad this team was, Jesse.
Yeah, no, it's because that middle portion of the season, you saw a dip in performance out of the car, and we all got worried. And at the beginning as well, and we're like, okay, it's Ferrari's not in this. Like, Aston Martin's kind of taken their place of the 3rd place team, and then we saw them take a step back, and now Ferrari's back. And I think this is where they should be. This feels kind of normal. This feels like Ferrari should have this car because they had it last year. Last year, their car was really impressive, and now they've gotten it back. And I'm happy for Ferrari because I think they deserve it. After all of the troubles they've had with strategy, they're slowly starting to get it together, and these drivers deserve better. Leclerc and Sainz deserve better. And yeah, the Leclerc drive today was a little unfortunate with that under the safety car when he pits and he has to wait for everybody to go by, and Lando just passes him outright in the pit. Like, what a shame that is. And I don't know what you chalk that up to other than bad luck and bad timing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Because the thing is that they have to hold him. I mean, if they let him loose, it turns into a crash, and it ends up him getting a penalty either way for an unsafe release. They got to keep him where he is. I mean, there is nothing they could have done about it. It was extremely unfortunate for him on his part. But, I think you said it well when you said that, Ferrari's strategy actually went according to plan today, and that's not something we can speak highly of the things that they've done in the past. But honestly, man, like, it looked good. They look solid. We'll see. I mean, Frederick Vasseur has made some changes in that strategy department, and kind of looks like things are getting a little bit more on track. So I'm excited. I'm excited for Ferrari moving forward throughout the rest of the season. I'm excited about next season and see what they can do. It does look like they clawed back a lot of the deficit to Red Bull. I mean, they all have. So I'm quite optimistic for what's to come. McLaren, dude, you want to talk about teams clawing back performance? Holy Jesus. So
how many races in a row now has Lando just been right there with everyone?
Man, they've been impressive. Like, they brought a massive upgrade to this car for this weekend. A big part of this upgrade was to help the car in the slower corners. They've been great in the high-speed stuff, but they brought a massive, massive upgrade to this thing. And honestly, Jesse, for McLaren, what's better than watching Zach Brown celebrate? Seriously.
No, that guy's always a good time. It's always fun when you get like the owner out there just celebrating and be so invested in the team. It's better than like the faceless owner. You get the guy who's down there and he's cheering on his team. It's awesome to see. Zach Brown's a fun dude.
It's like giving himself high fives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that guy, man. You remember I don't know if you remember this, 2020 Austria. I can't remember if it was like race 1 or race 2, but Lando ended up getting, believe it was like P3, and Zach looked like he was going to crush Lando. That's how hard he was celebrating with him and hugging him. It was friggin' hilarious, dude.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lando's race, he was he was awesome today as well. He's been awesome all weekend. He's been great all season long. We had heard talks of Lando going to Red Bull one day and partnering with Max Verstappen. There's no way in hell Zach Brown allows Lando Norris to leave that team.
No, that guy's the face of McLaren for a long time now. And yeah, this is his second place finish in let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 races. That's like, what more can you ask for in a season that's been dominated by Max? If you're finishing second, That's basically first place, that's how Lando's got to look at it. And it's been fantastic for him to see how, because remember, we came into this season and that first race, it was death for McLaren. Like, we didn't know what happened to the car. They're not going to compete. And then we get to this midway point, and they're just fantastic, and good for Lando because he deserves it as a talented young driver, and his future, just like Sainz, his future is so bright.
And I remember I was texting with Adam Wilde the other day about McLaren. He's a huge McLaren fan. Explaining to him how they were able to bring an upgrade of the size that they brought to the track. So just to confirm, so if Adam's listening, so he knows, McLaren has confirmed to me that yes, the new wind tunnel is operational. It is working at their factory, and that is where the 2024 car is currently being worked on. And then they're also working on the 2023 car in the other wind tunnel that they use out in Cologne. I believe it is Toyota's wind tunnel. So they have, McLaren has 2 wind tunnels on the go right now. Pretty good. I mean, this is great for them. Like, I was worried that this thing wasn't going to get done in time and was going to really affect their 2024 season. But they've been impressive, all the performance they've clawed back, Jesse.
Yeah. Where's the new wind tunnel?
So the new one's at the factory itself. So when we went there for the British Grand Prix and we got to do the tour and we did the car launch with Lando, Oscar, and Zach, it is literally being built right in house there. Like, you can see the construction and everything, and it's massive. It's cool. I didn't get to go inside and take a look at it, but maybe one day. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So, and that's where it's at.
This is going to be like a big help on the technical side, just to have that in-house as opposed to over at Toyota, right? This is going to be a huge advantage for them going forward.
Massive. So, yeah, Andres Stella, heard from him after the race. He believes that the new package, so the new upgrade that they brought for this weekend, he can confirm that it is working. The improvements are correlating with their development tools, he said. So development tools being CFD and the wind tunnel. So their new wind tunnel, and then also the one that they're using out in Cologne and with Toyota. So that's a positive thing when your team principal is saying that the things that you're working on is correlating with the things that are happening on the racetrack. Because sometimes what happens, Jesse, with wind tunnels, and especially if you have something new going on, or you have new CFD or have a new wind tunnel, sometimes there's glitches in the system. They don't add up, and you bring things to the car and they just do not work. So for the team and for Andre Stella to publicly say that to us, I mean, that's a huge W for this team. Massive. Really massive.
We haven't even mentioned Piastri, who started 17th and finished 7th.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Yeah.
all those places he picks up, just kind of casually without anybody noticing. He didn't kind of pass anybody; just everybody kind of went by him, and then he just ends up in 7th. It's fantastic for Piastri there too.
And then think about it this way too, because this is a really difficult track, right? Like, it's a really tough street circuit, and you're a rookie coming into Formula One. You've never driven on this racetrack ever, and he goes from 17th to 7th. Like, incredible. That is an incredible drive. I don't know who won driver of the day. I wish I did, but it should be either Carlos Sainz or Oscar Piastri, because that was an amazing drive on a very difficult track for him.
Yeah, probably Carlos Sainz, but Piastri deserves that as much as him. Very impressive,
man. Do I have any nice things to say about McLaren still? Yeah, I mean, I guess my next question for you would be, do you think that they could catch Aston Martin in the Constructors standings right now?
Oh, yeah. I assume we'll spend a little bit of time on the disaster that it was Aston Martin's weekend, but if it keeps trending in that direction and McLaren keeps going forward, I think easily. If Alonso can't keep a cool head with a car that's not working, then if both Piastri and Norris are performing at the level they are, I think, by the end of this season, it'll be McLaren ahead of them.
Yeah, I agree. Aston Martin with 217 points. They've dropped out of 3rd down to 4th. Ferrari takes over 3rd, Aston Martin in 4th, and you have McLaren with 139 points in 5th. And they are not that far behind with good upgrades, strong car, strong package. it is a realistic thing that it could happen that Aston Martin goes from being P2 in the Constructors' Championship down to P5 at the end of this season. Can you imagine that drop off?
Oh, what a disappointment for them. And just overall, yeah, just poor weekend. I guess it starts with Lance running into the wall and then them not being able to get the car ready, and his injuries, give him a little bit more time to recover. And then from there, just Alonso's fighting with the car the entire race, and he's on the radio complaining. And then his brakes lock up going into the pit entry, and then he's crashing at the end of it. Like, just all around, nothing good happened for Aston Martin all weekend. And it's been like this for a little bit. Like, there's a reason that they've been falling down the standings, because they haven't had a solid race for quite a while now. And I'm worried about them, because McLaren and these other teams are going to catch up and they're going to pass them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a horrible weekend for the team as a whole. I don't know how they've managed to have such great performance at the start of the season and then just completely drop out of the window, even though they've brought upgrades to the cars, and so has everybody else. Everybody else has upgraded their cars really hard, and Aston Martin still has budget, still has room for development. They can still keep developing this car. And it's been tough for Lance. Obviously, he's made mistakes. The team has made mistakes on his behalf as well, and so those two things aren't on the same page. And then you've got Alonso trying to wrestle an ill-handling race car at the same time. So it's been tough for Aston Martin, and it'll be interesting to watch if they can turn this thing around for them. The incident that happened with Lance, I mean, that was just such a compounded scenario of how that unraveled. You had in Q1, Stroll gets impeded by Logan Sargent. The thing with Lance was, he was in a positive state of mind going into qualifying because he had a good FP3. He was in lockstep with his teammate Fernando Alonso. The team was looking good for qualifying. Both drivers extremely happy. Get into quali, gets impeded by Logan Sargent. That ruins the tire. That ruins the push lap. Puts him already on the back foot. He gets called into the pits to get new tires. He gets called to the weighbridge by the FIA. That puts him in the back of the queue. And so for those of you who don't know, so when the team finally gets you a clean bit of space where you can go and pump in a push lap, that's designed so you can go and do it again in being called what's called the queue. And so by him being called to the weighbridge, he's now dead last in the queue. And so he's got to wrestle his way through all these other drivers who are trying to set their lap times as well, but at the same time, they're jockeying for positions, right? Because they all want to get some space, so they're all backing each other up in the last few corners. And so for Stroll, he's trying to prep the tire. The team is yelling at him to get in front of all these other cars, so he's racing ahead to do that, but by doing that, he's ruining the preparation of the tire. So it's kind of like baking a cake. So if you overdrive the tire, you overcook your cake. If you underdrive the tire, you underbake your cake. So it's raw. It's not going to work. It's not going to taste very good.
Love the analogy. Perfect.
If you bake the tire properly, you bake the cake properly, it tastes good. The tire works. It's got a ton of performance. And that's how these tires work. And so for Lance, he's not able to do that. So starting that push lap, tires are junk. Can't do anything about that now. He's got an Alpine car that's 2 seconds ahead of him. That's disturbing the airflow that comes back to his car, which ruins the downforce. And so normally these drivers have more of a buffer. They usually have somewhere about 4 to 5 seconds worth of buffer so they can get clean air and pump in a good lap. So for Lance, though, he's got the Alpine of Pierre Gasly, I believe it was, 2 seconds up the road. That's disturbing all the air. So he doesn't have perfect downforce. He gets halfway through the lap. He's looking down at the steering wheel, seeing the lap delta and how far off he is. And he knows that it's going to be difficult for him to get through to Q2. And so the only option he's got left is try and send one into the last corner because that's the fastest part of the track. And that's where you can make up the most time. Gets up onto the curb, just hits this bump, just this little tiny bump. And that's enough to just raise the platform of the race car just a little bit, get too much air under there, gets a snap of oversteer, and right into the wall. You've got bad tires, you've got a car in front of you, and you've also hit this bump. It's just a compounded thing that happened to the guy. I felt bad for him too, because he actually was on pace this weekend with Fernando Alonso when it came to the end of FP3, and that's where you want to be when you're building up to your weekend. And so for Lance, not able to go in the race, team said he was too sore. I also think that they may not have had enough spares, Jesse, because they got to go on to Japan, right?
Yeah, like to rebuild that car, because it was the front half of that car was completely torn off. It was unbelievable to watch when it was just sitting there, the wreckage. And thank goodness that Lance was okay, because he had that injury in the preseason with his wrists, and I was really worried about that. Like initially, when you see him hit the wall like that, you're like, I swear, if he re-injured those wrists, like that's awful, and I don't want that to happen. So I was very thankful he wasn't hurt badly in that crash.
Yeah, me too. I think part of it is, with Singapore, even in the race, there's always some chaos happening. And if you get too many damaged parts and you haven't, unfortunately, brought enough with you, because from here they got to go straight to Japan, it's not easy to just like load a bunch of new parts into some freight and send that to Japan. Like it is very difficult. So the teams only bring so many spares and everything with them. And Lance's crash was so big that, I don't know. I think that has something to do with it as well, but no one can confirm that. So but it's tough for Lance.
Like, you can draw some conclusions from that. But I don't know. I wonder about Lance's season. And Tim, I don't know if this is on the table for Aston Martin, because they've said it's not the case. But is Lance's seat in jeopardy at all going into next year?
Nothing that I've heard of that would put it in jeopardy. For the most part, like they are happy with like the amount of effort and work he's putting into things. I think like Mike Crack said it best. I mean, there was I think it was David. It might have been David Croft from Sky Sports. I believe it was. He was on a podcast and he had questioned, I believe, his desire to compete. Could he keep it up? Could he keep competing at a high level in Formula One, like in a few years' time or whatever? And I think like one of the things that we don't see is all the work that he puts in behind the scenes. And that's like one of those things where it's like, well, I would like to see it. You know what I mean? Like I know he's doing, like I know how hard the guy has to work. Like I know, and it's a lot. And I just hope if like Netflix like spends some time with him, follows him around, sees what he does. Like I think that's important. And I think on the other side of that, Mike Crack had mentioned something in his pre-race press conference on Sunday, was that, if you don't have a driver who's not committed, then they are not going to stay committed through the final turn at Singapore. And that's exactly what Lance did.
Yeah. No, so, that's a great point.
That's a pretty good point. I'm like, oh yeah, you got something there. Yeah. you gotta put it all out there, man. And that 300 kph, it's not that hard. It's not that easy. Let's talk about Mercedes. So Toto Wolff said at the end of this one, we tried to win and we didn't.
That's how you got to sum it up. And with Mercedes, it starts back at qualifying, because I thought George had the fastest car in qualifying. I looked at him like, he has the fastest car. If he puts in a perfect lap, he's gonna get P1. And even on his last lap there, where he just fell short of Sainz, I was like, there was I think it was the second to last turn. If he's not a little swervy on the wheel, like if he hits it perfectly, he gets a couple tenths there and he's P1. But he just couldn't get it in qualifying there.
I like that George Russell was going for it on Sunday. I like that he was like, F it, I'm going for it. You've got, like, if you think about this, Jesse, back at Mercedes base, and then even in the garage, like you've got race strategists, you've got AI technology, you've got algorithms, you've got so much stuff like behind the scenes that is giving you data and outcomes for different things that if you do with the car, put the tire on, which pit, like what lap you're coming in, et cetera, et cetera. George was just like, screw it. I want to win. Just what do we have to do to get the win? I don't care about podiums. I don't care about second place. He's like, I want to win.
Yeah.
I like that.
At this point of the season, like that's all you're fighting for is just who can win now, because the points, adding them up, I guess you're also fighting for second in the constructors.
Yeah, I was just going to say that
the drivers' championship,
because Ferrari could creep up on them for sure, because they already jumped into third, and there's a lot of money at stake, Jesse. I mean, like you need the points, you need them.
Yeah, I guess you need the points. So I shouldn't say it's only about wins, but you think about how dominant Red Bull is. You know, if they're one. You just want to get some wins in there. And the virtual safety car I thought was very interesting, because I saw some of the discussion after the race online, and some of it was said on TV, but they were saying you could have split up the Mercedes, where you leave George out there, you have him in second, and then you put Lewis on the brand new medium tires that they very smartly saved for this race that nobody else had. It was a very good plan, but I thought that was interesting, the idea you can split up the Mercedes, but on the side of, hey, George is going for the win, you put him on the new mediums and you just say, go after it. And that's kind of the side I think George would have sided with if you gave him the option on the radio. It's either leaving you out on those really used hards and you're trying to just manage your way, or you get the new tires and you just go racing, you try and pull back all that time.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. And I think it was their strategy was the fastest. So Mercedes' strategy was the fastest. What George wanted to do, what Lewis wanted to do, that was the fastest way of getting to victory. And, you know, all that stuff that we talked about with Carlos and Lando and the DRS effect and all that, you know, if one of those drivers gets past Lando, it's over for Carlos.
Yeah.
Over.
100%. Yeah.
Like he was fading worse than Lando was. Like, it is over for Carlos Sainz. So the Mercedes crew, they were on that better strategy. And for George, you know, essentially clipping that wall, what had happened the lap before, and you probably already heard it, but Lando actually clipped the exact same wall. He clipped it with the front right. And George clipped it with, I can't remember if it was both rear. I can't remember if it was both front and rear, or if it was just rear, but it was enough to looked like it broke the steering arm, and that was it. George couldn't control the car and straight into the wall.
I also saw that a lot of people wanted Lewis to be let through, and I was like, you can't do that at this point of the race. You know, he looked like he had the faster car, and he did, based on just the times they were putting in when they were in all that clean air, and they were both of them just going at it. Lewis was faster. It was only by a couple tenths, but he did have the faster car. So I understand the argument of putting him through just from a race strategy point, but unless George is the one calling for that, there's no way Mercedes can say, hey, let Lewis through, he's faster. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, when you're at that point, you're running nose to tail, and then you're both fast enough to be in line for a win, and you could actually have a Mercedes 1-2. Yeah, you can't just go and screw around with it and try and swap them, and then you're losing time trying to swap because, you know, George may not want to let Lewis by, and just arguing with them on the radio, and then you're losing all that time. And eventually by trying to do that, Lando and Carlos get away just enough that you can't even bring him in. So even for pace wise, like, it just wouldn't have made any sense. Like, Lewis, I think, was about a half of tenth faster than George was at the end there on that final stint. And so even that's not enough, right? You need, and like we had said earlier, you need that 1.5 seconds of pace just to clear somebody easily. Like, it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah. If you're looking for, like, if Mercedes is sitting there and you're looking for a reason, like, hey, why couldn't we get 1-2? You know, the strategy should have played out. I think they just ran out of laps. Like, it was the perfect strategy.
Yep.
It's just, it needed to be 3 laps longer, and they just didn't have those laps. And Sainz had a perfect race as we went through. Lando did awesome defending, and George just couldn't get by. I don't think any of those 3 drivers really are at fault here. It was just great driving by all 3 of them. And it's just, if it's a couple laps further, Mercedes is probably sitting here 1-2, and it's an incredible race for them.
Max Verstappen finishes 5th. Just a terrible weekend, though, for Red Bull in general. Sergio Perez finishing P8. They were lost as soon as they touched the track. Like, they knew coming into this weekend that it was going to be difficult. They knew the track wasn't going to suit their car and what their car does and what their driver does. But I don't think they thought that they were going to be this far off the pace and have this many difficulties. I mean, it was funny. Lando Norris told us Sunday in the post-race press conference that him and Max Verstappen were watching Max's onboard camera from his qualifying, and they were both laughing at it because Lando said he'd never seen a car so bad.
Oh my gosh, really?
Awesome.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
Do you know because Max was complaining a lot about the changes that Red Bull was made to the car from practice to qualifying, and he was saying how it was decent, I think, in FP2, and then they made some changes in FP3, and they came with a slightly modified was it the front wing or the floor? I forget. And he wasn't happy with the car at all this weekend. And do you have any more details on that part?
Max was like not happy whatsoever all weekend long. Like it didn't even matter what session they were even in. But I think like one of the big things, I'm trying to remember if it was free practice. I think it was the end of free practice 3. Mm-hmm. Max was like on the radio, like, this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And a big part of it for him was the fact that they couldn't get the balance nailed down for Verstappen's car. And same with Sergio's car as well. He also had trouble. But what I mean by that is like too much on the front, too much on the rear. Couldn't find that good sweet spot. Red Bull, like you'd said, they did bring some upgrades for this weekend. It was a rear wing end plate, and then also there was the floor edge as well that was new on their car for this weekend. But just not enough for them. It was also interesting. I don't know if you saw it. I put it on Twitter because the FIA had sent it to me, but it had to do with this new technical directive for flexi wings.
Yeah,
and so. Sorry, finish your thought.
No, because I think the flexi wing, all the other teams were like, this only affects Red Bull, right? They're like, you brought a directive that Red Bull only has in place.
Actually, the flexi wing sounds like it was geared towards a few other teams. Okay. It wasn't so much that it was geared towards Red Bull. There weren't many that were saying that. I mean, apparently, if we go back to Azerbaijan, apparently, not confirmed, but there were some flexi bits on the Aston Martin that I guess the FIA didn't really like that much. But the technical directive is basically about making sure that the FIA, the teams, they all have a common understanding of where the FIA is going to draw the line in terms of the design details. So how much can bodywork flex? And so what I mean by that is when the car is passing through space, when it's on the racetracks, going down the straights or whatever, there's so much load being put on the wings and all of this other stuff, the carbon fiber bits, it actually flexes. But that gives you performance because it's not adding drag to the car. Like you're kind of limiting it at that moment. So you're going faster in a straight line. And then the wing is sort of stops flexing once you come to the braking zones and the cornering, it flexes just a tiny bit. So the thing is that how much are these parts allowed to flex?
Right.
Because you can't necessarily say that, oh, hey, it can only flex this amount. Like, how are you going to measure that?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to get like like how you're going to get an FIA steward, you're going to duct tape him to the front of the wing and like start measuring the wing as it flexes as you're going down the straightaway. No, it's ridiculous, right? You have to get sensors to do that. But I think the sensors can only read so much. So they have to find different ways of putting load on these cars to find out where and how much they are flexing. But this new rule, well, it's not really a rule. It's more of a technical directive. Mm-hmm. Has come in for this weekend, started this weekend, and everybody's like, oh, Red Bull's off the pace. It must be the new technical directive. It's like, is it though? Like, do we really know that?
No, we're going to get to Japan and Max is going to be 30 seconds ahead.
Yeah, he's going to blow the doors off to everybody. Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I just think it was a really horrible weekend for Red Bull as a whole on a track that just didn't suit them whatsoever, and the other teams just took advantage.
Yeah.
That's what they boiled down to.
Should Sergio have been better? The question that is asked after every single race this season. should Perez have performed better today?
Yeah, I mean, like there were some. I mean that was a questionable call on Alex Albon. I don't know how Sergio didn't get a penalty for that.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
that late lunge. I don't know how he didn't get a penalty for that. Well, sorry, he did get a penalty. My apologies. He did get a penalty for his incident with Alex Albon. He got a 5-second time penalty, but that didn't do anything. I believe he also got a penalty point as well on his license. Mm-hmm. But the 5-second time penalty didn't do anything to him, because he was already, I think the gap from himself to Liam Lawson was something like 11 seconds or something like that. But I thought Sergio at points this weekend was actually really good, like decent, like better than Max. Like there were sessions where he finished ahead of him on a street circuit where Sergio has been known to be very strong at. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a tough season for Perez for sure, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's like he's had a really tough time all year, and you're rooting for the guy. You know, yes. You want to see him perform better. So it's tough to see him at the back of the pack in any weekend, you know, because of being in Max's shadow. You want Perez to do a little better. And even for Max, like going from 11th to 5th, that's still a really good race. I think for any other driver, we look at that and we say, hell yeah, that's a great weekend. But because Max has set the bar at the highest level that anybody's ever set it, him finishing in 5th is an extreme disappointment.
Yeah, 100%. And jumping back to our flexi wing conversation, most of the things that Max was complaining about was more along the lines of the car bottoming out and bouncing a little bit. So a lot of that has to do with ride height adjustment, and that has nothing to do with wings. Has everything to do with how high the car is in comparison to the actual ground. How about Pierre Gasly and Alpine? I mean, obviously Esteban Ocon going up in smoke, but for Gasly, really solid race, Jesse, from him, finishing P6, collecting some points for this team.
Yeah, no, I think Gasly did a great job climbing from 12 to 6, and with Ocon, I felt really bad for Ocon because I thought he was fantastic, like during the race, and at the point where he got knocked out, was he not like top 8? I think he was in and around there.
Yeah, something like that. Wasn't
it was he was aiming for a great race, and Gasly always seems to be in there despite the deficiencies of the car. Like I don't think Alpine has the best car on any kind of track, but Gasly always seems to be fighting for points, and it's an impressive season for him considering that.
Yeah, he's done really, you make a great point. He's done really good this season, jumping into this new team, and then all the stuff internally that's been going on with when Otmar Safnauer and Alan Permain got let go. And I think for Pierre, he's done well to keep his head, learn a new car, learn a new system, learn a new team, and perform. I think he's done very, very well. Liam Lawson is another driver who's done really well since basically, I guess, deputizing or taking over for Daniel Ricciardo until Ricciardo returns, which is probably going to be in and around Qatar. What'd you make of Lawson? What do you think?
Are they going to find him a seat? Like, who finds Liam Lawson a seat? Because for him to come in there with no experience and score points in Singapore is impressive. Like, flat out, to do that is crazy impressive. And I wonder if somebody looks at their lineup and they say, we need to make room for somebody who's proven that they can do this in F1 for, what is it now, 3 races he's been doing this? And
this will be the third one.
This is the third one. Yep. Yeah. And each time you're like, oh, that's a decent drive from Lawson. Like, he can handle this. So I wonder if anybody makes a decision to bring him to their team.
Well, you have to wonder about Williams and Logan Sargent, right? I mean, because that's what everybody's been talking about. And clearly that's the next open seat, aside from the 2 AlphaTauri seats that are still currently available for next season. But it's that means that like somehow, some way, the Red Bull team is going to have to do some sort of a deal with Williams. But then remember that they did something similar with Alex Albon back a few years ago when they allowed Albon to go to Williams. He was still contracted as a Red Bull driver, and so it would be something similar, I'm assuming. But I don't know if it, but then it comes into like James Vowles, right? You have to remember, like, this is a team principal. It's his first year as a team principal. You have to wonder if this is the guy who is thinking about putting his stamp on the driver lineup as well. Like, he's already starting to put his stamp off the track with the team and everything they need to do at the factory. And you can see it because the car has been really competitive. But then it's like he has to make that decision of the drivers. And if we go back to the time when he was working at Mercedes, he evaluated Logan Sargeant, and he didn't think that Logan was good enough to be a part of their program. And lo and behold, Logan's driving for him. And he has defended Logan, and he has supported Logan. And so Logan actually had a not so bad race today, considering he did get into an accident, but he ended up finishing 14th. But the pace, not that bad all weekend, considering he's never been to this track. And so, I don't know, Jesse. It's tough. It's a tough decision to make, right? Because Yuki Tsunoda's awesome right now, and you don't know what you're going to get from Daniel Ricciardo when he comes back. He was looking really good when he left.
Yeah, I don't think you can move out Yuki or Daniel. Like, I think. Well, Daniel's going to get a couple races when he comes back to prove what he can do, but I think, like, we all know what kind of driver he is, and if you get him at AlphaTauri, I think you get that opportunity to just run with it. And Yuki, like, for Yuki, it's been the car that's failed them. Like, it's been just where he didn't start a couple races ago, and then now he gets 10 laps in, and then
he got hit by Perez.
Yeah, and then Perez runs him off the road. Yeah, he can't continue. So you just feel for Yuki. It's disappointing. But with Logan Sargeant and Albon, I look at the results and I say, Sargeant hasn't scored a point all season.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a disappointment. I don't know how you look at that in any other way but a disappointment when you have somebody in the same car in Albon who's been fantastic all year. Has 21 points so far this season, and has looked like a great driver, race in and race out. And Logan Sargeant has been nothing but disappointing. And if you have somebody like Liam Lawson who scored points, something as Sargeant hasn't done, sitting there, maybe I think you got to at least explore the option of making that deal with Red Bull and getting him over there to Williams.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right on that point where you do have to explore that. Logan needs to be better. He does. I mean, he's been in the car long enough now that he should really understand what's happening with it and be able to come to grips with it. Still has some races left for sure, but now he's going to tracks that he's never been to, right? He's never been to Japan, and same with Qatar, never raced on that track either. And so, yeah, for Logan, I mean, these are going to be tough races coming up for him, but I mean, he did show okay this weekend, like, because I really pay attention to the lap deltas, like how far off is everybody from each other in every single session. Like, I comb through every single session and take a look at where everybody is in relation to their teammates and how their sessions went. And did they get screwed up anyway, or shape or form? But Logan actually he did all right this weekend, except for that error that he made in the race, obviously. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think at the end of the day, you got to keep, I think, Yuki Tsunoda at AlphaTauri. And I think you got to do the same with Daniel Ricciardo. And then if Williams doesn't want a deal, then I guess you make Liam Lawson your reserve driver down at Red Bull Racing. And if Yuki or Daniel aren't performing, you put him in next season. That's just what you do. I mean, that's essentially some of the times what Red Bull Racing does, right? Like they pull their guys out of there pretty quick sometimes.
Happened with Nick DeVries.
Last point scoring position goes to Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. He wouldn't have got it though if George didn't crash out, but George crashed out, and so Magnussen gets that point. Good for him. Good for the team. Jesse, this car is going to look a lot different come the U.S. Grand Prix. It sounds like they're doing away with the entire thing that they've got, and they're bringing something new.
Okay. I didn't know so they're still really working at this year's car and not working towards the 2024 car.
It seems that way. Speaking with Lawrence Edmondson, who was on the podcast on Thursday, he had made mention that even though Dallara, who works on their cars, that's got to be a difficult thing for the team to do, because you're not really in charge of like everything that's being made for this race car. You don't necessarily have your own sort of factory. We can build things in a separate companies doing all of that, a lot of that for you. So yeah, they're pushing forward with this new design for the U.S. Grand Prix. I'm excited to see what happens with it, but good for Haas for getting some points. It's been a tough season for them, up and down for sure. Let's head on over and do the debrief. Take your questions from social media. Jesse, my okay, let's just get right into this thing here. This is from Nick Ignatov. With Lawson's performance, what do you think the Red Bull Racing AlphaTauri lineups look like next year? I'm starting to think it could be Max, Perez, Lawson, Ricardo. But that goes back to our last discussion where it's like, what do you do with Yuki Tsunoda? You can't. The guy's been too good, right?
No, like, Yuki has earned that seat. I think if they move on from anyone, it would be Daniel, because of how little time he's had in the car. And I think they'd side with him and go with the experience there. So I see the AlphaTauri seats staying the same. But yeah, I love what Yuki's done this season. I think he's grown as a driver. I think he's finally taken a couple steps forward. I think it was getting kind of stagnant in 2022 from where he was the previous year, but now we've seen a little bit of a step forward from Yuki, and I think it's they have a good drivers lineup for next season going into it. I don't see why they would need to change.
From Patrick Sherman, Jesse, was this the best Grand Prix of the season so far?
Yes, it's what we've been asking for, because every race we come here and we say, if Max wasn't so far out ahead, the race would be spectacular. Yeah. The race for second place has been great, and this was essentially the race for second place, but first place. So yeah, awesome. Best race of the year.
I agree. Graham Bell, did race control ignore Checo's two incidents to put Tsunoda out and Albon out of the points? Well, they didn't ignore them. They didn't ignore, especially the one with Alex Albon. That one he ended up getting, like we had said, a 5-second time penalty, 1 point on the old super license as well. I was going through some of the other tweets, but like from Ty Jagger says it's absolutely the best race of the season, no question. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of this. Like,
can I throw in a question that I forgot to bring up from earlier in the podcast when we were talking 100%. About Red Bull? What happened with the incidents with Max in qualifying? Because he had three incidents that he had to talk to the FIA about and the stewards about, and all of them resulted in no penalties.
Mm-hmm. So I've got a list. Let me see if I can find them. I've got a list of those incidents that Max had, and they ended up being basically brushed over, essentially. Let me see if I can find the proper wording here.
Okay. Because yeah, I thought it was fascinating that there was no grid penalty at the end of all of that. Just even if you compound them together, it adds up to something. But
100%.
Yeah, I was shocked to see him just walk away with 11th place.
Okay, so there was no action on Verstappen for impeding Logan Sargent. Mm-hmm. He was handed 2 reprimands. He was handed a reprimand for his first infringement, which was impeding the cars that were trying to exit the pit lane. So everybody who was behind him, and then you heard George Russell on the radio complaining. And then the final one, so it was for impeding Yuki Tsunoda, which is, I thought that was a slam dunk penalty, no questions asked. He ended up getting another reprimand for that, and the team was fined 5,000 euros for it. Now, if I can find in my notes all of the infringements, I can tell you exactly what the FIA deemed. Here they are. Here's the one. This is the one on Yuki Tsunoda. So the reason, this is from the stewards, from the FIA. The stewards heard from driver of car number 1, Max Verstappen, a team representative, and reviewed positioning, marshalling system data, video, team radio, and in-car video evidence. Just prior to car number 22, who's Yuki Tsunoda, passing car 1, the driver of car 1 saw the car behind approaching and moved to the left. However, it was quite late. The team admitted that there was poor communication on its part and that it did not advise its driver until car 22 was alongside. The stewards reviewed a number of impeding and alleged impeding incidences from this current season, and consistent with previous decisions in relation to the severity of the breach, impose a penalty of a reprimand on the driver and a fine on the competitor. It was noted that the representative of car 22, who was Yuki Tsunoda, chose to not attend the hearing.
Wow. It's like when you go to court and you hope that the cop doesn't show up for your traffic ticket, so you get off. If they don't show up, then you don't have to pay them to park at the traffic ticket.
I think also like a big part of it was for the other drivers to like show up, or the other teams or whatever. You essentially are giving your side of the story. And that's pretty much it. Adam Cooper, actually, over at Autosport, he was able to kind of break this thing down as to why Tsunoda missed the hearing. And so if you go over to his Twitter account, or you go to Autosport, there's an article that was called "Why AlphaTauri Skipped Verstappen's Singapore F1 impeding hearing," and in there he details step by step of how it basically was a miscommunication of why and how he missed the actual thing. So, but nothing bad can come of Yuki because of doing that. He just can't go and give his case,
right?
Essentially,
and they sided with Red Bull, I guess. Either way.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Like you still were like you were given a reprimand and a fine. So, technically they didn't get away scot-free, but should they have been given a grid penalty of maybe like 3 places? I think so. I think he probably should have gotten one for that one, but
it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, if you look at it, Max was still going to make his way through the field at some point. If he's starting P14 instead of P11, he's probably going to end up being P7 instead of P5. Mm-hmm. He's still winning the championship. By the time we get to Qatar, he's probably going to have this thing sewn up. The Constructors Championship as well is probably going to be sewn up in the next few races at the same time. So, either way, does it really matter? I mean, at the end of the day, Yuki would move up a few places, maybe because of Max. I think he'd move up a place because of Max getting a penalty, I think. But at the same time, would it really matter? Probably not. Yeah. But still, probably should have been handed a penalty. Jesse, thanks very much for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it. Let everybody know what you got going on. I guess you guys got a big show going on tomorrow now, eh?
Yeah. If you're a fan of hockey, check out the Steve Danko podcast or the Chris Johnston show. It's a lot of preseason news. Training camps haven't even open, but coaches are getting fired. So if you want some good hockey content, check out all the podcasts on SDPN. We got plenty of stuff going on.
And then you also have the Jesse Blake Sports Report.
Yeah. I also do a podcast about talk all the other sports in the sporting industry. We did a lot of Jays last week with their terrible sweep, and now they're back all of a sudden. Might talk a little NFL tonight. So yeah, check out the Jesse Blake Sports Report if you want some other sporting content.
So I got questions for you about the Jays.
Sure.
Okay, so I after qualifying on Saturday, my dad ended up taking me to the game. Oh, nice. And we got there though at like 4:00, so we'd already missed 5 innings because I was doing stuff for SportsCenter, and I didn't get done doing the stuff for SportsCenter until about 3:30. Game started at 3. Got to the stadium around 4:15. Okay, so pitch clock. Do you like it?
Oh yeah, it's improved baseball like tenfold. It allows for games to be under 3 hours again. It adds some urgency to the play of baseball. Baseball is usually this. It became a joke where there's so much time in between one pitch to the other, and now there's a sense of urgency and there's a pace to baseball. It's been absolutely fantastic for the game.
Starting a runner on second in extra
innings.
Do you like that?
No. Get rid of that. No, I'm not a fan. I don't think we need the they called it the ghost runner, but it's not really a ghost runner. But the runner starting on second, don't need it.
Okay, when you want to walk a batter, instead of like flat out just throwing 4 balls, they just walk them now.
Great new. I don't know why they ever threw 4 pitches.
Right?
After seeing it like this, you're like, why did we ever stand there and the catcher's got to put his arm out and then catch the ball to the side, and we got to do that 4 times for what? Just go to first base. It's an intentional walk. So
I said that to my dad. I was like, wait a second, why is Vladdy just running down to first base? He's like, well, they walked him. I'm like, no, they didn't. They didn't throw 4 balls. What the hell is going on? He's like, no. I was like, that's a new rule now. And I'm like, what do you mean it's a new rule? He's like, yeah. They just say, if we're going to walk him, just tell the ump you're going to walk him, and he goes down to first, and that's it. And I'm like, that's genius. Well, why weren't we doing this before?
So much time wasting. Yeah. No, MLB did a great job with some of the new rules this season.
No, it was good. I like that. I had a good time at the game. Jays won, obviously. It was like 4-3, I think the final was, or something like that.
Yeah. No, you saw an exciting one.
Yeah, it was pretty good. What was my next question? So are they going to get into the wild card or what?
I think so, because the Jays do a great job beating up on teams below them in the standings, and they got a couple more games versus the Yankees coming up. They got a tough series versus the Rays, too, but I don't know. They seem like they're going to squeak in and then probably do nothing in the playoffs because it's going to be typical Jays. But I can see them. I think they won again today, so they're going to sweep the series versus the Red Sox. They're going to be probably a game up on Seattle at the end of this, going into the last couple games of the season. They'll probably squeak in and then may get their butts kicked once they get to the playoffs. But it is what it is. At least they're in.
Okay, if they don't get in, who gets fired first?
I think the GM needs to go. He's been there since 2015. They had the playoff run in 2016, but I don't give him a lot of credit for that one. Not the biggest fan of Ross Atkins and the moves he's been making. He's always been shuffling around the team for the last couple of years, and nothing's really stuck. And if you have a bunch of players that are underachieving for a few years now, maybe it's not the players. It's the guy who's assembling the players. So I think Ross Atkins has had enough time, and it's probably his last season here if the Jays miss it here.
Interesting times ahead. So if you folks want to hear
Can
more,
I ask you one question?
Yeah.
What did you think of the upgrades to the Rogers Center?
Oh, dude, it's really nice.
Yeah, you like it? Yeah. Okay,
so for folks who are listening, we have people who listen to us all the way out in the Netherlands, and we have folks all over the world who listen to the show. So in Toronto, the Rogers Center is where the Toronto Blue Jays play. The Toronto Argonauts, which is a CFL team, they used to play there a long time ago. But now it's just strictly baseball. And they've been doing a lot of facelifting to this stadium because it's been around, Jesse, since I was probably like 6 years old. Like, how old do you think the Rogers Center is? Like, I think
it's
98?
89. 89, I think it's the first year. Yeah,
way off. Woo! Yeah. So, I was like 6 years old. So, for this stadium, extremely old, and inside of it, they've been retooling it piece by piece over the past few years. But this past off season, total facelift to the inside of it. Everything got changed except for the seating down in the lower bowl,
which they're doing this off season.
Yeah, which they're going to do this off season. And essentially, it's like you've got different parts of the stadium. You got this one part's kind of like for adults. It's like a club. You go there and get wasted if you wanted to and watch a tiny bit of baseball. Or you've got like playland for like the 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds, and the parents just want to be like, hey, take my kids for this game. Take them. I'm going over to the adult section and getting hammered. Yeah. So you have that. And then there's like a hot dog. Schneider's has their own like hot dog eating section.
It's a lot of fun.
Jesse, I got a buddy of mine who loves what is it? Is it Looney Tuesday? Is that what it's called?
Oh, Looney Dog Nights. Yeah.
Looney Dog Night.
Yeah.
Okay. So loonies are $1 here in Canada.
We gotta explain that too.
Yeah, that's what a loony is. It's $1. And so they sell hot dogs for $1 at the stadium on these special nights.
Tuesdays, yeah.
Yeah, that's so my buddy like goes in there and he's like, I'm gonna take 4 hot dogs. So the guy's like, 4 hot dogs. He's like, yeah, don't worry, brother. I'm coming back for 4 more after I'm done these.
I was there last Tuesday for Looney Dog Night, and I only had 2, but they're for $1. They're really good hot dogs. You know, you think you're getting like the lowest grade hot dog. For $1, they're really good.
Dude, I didn't think we'd end up talking about hot dogs on here.
No, I didn't expect baseball talk and hot dog talk. Looney Dog.
It was fun. Like I had a good time. I haven't been to I went to a Jays game with some friends last month, but like outside, like I don't it's not something I normally do. If anything, I go to a Toronto Raptors game, and that's kind of like where I spent my money. But my dad was like, "Hey, I got these sweet tickets. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we went. It was a good time. I had fun. Jesse, this has been fun. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. For more Nailing the Apex, folks, head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review. It really helps us grow the show. You can watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. We will be back later on in the week to set up the Japanese Grand Prix. We'll talk to you all later.